Welcome to Original Being, where we explore the timeless wisdom of ancient practices and old ways of living, from holistic health and wellness to survival techniques, homesteading, and primitive skills. I'm Jillian Aries, a functional and holistic-minded physician associate and a homesteading mother of 3. I am on a quest to reconnect with this knowledge our ancestors lived by, practical skills, natural healing, and self-sufficiency in a modern world. Each episode, I'll be sharing insights, experiences, and conversations with experts and everyday people who embody this mindset. Together, we'll challenge modern conveniences, embrace hands-on learning, and rediscover the practices that have stood the test of time. Disclaimer, the information shared on this podcast is for educational and entertainment purposes only. My opinions and those of my guests are solely our own and are not affiliated with any institutions, employers, or certifications. This podcast does not provide medical advice, and any health-related decisions should be made in consultation with your personal healthcare provider. By listening, you acknowledge that you take full responsibility for your own choices and actions.
Today on Original Being, we have Maria Santee. She is a functional medicine physician assistant and restorative fertility expert based in California. She's the founder of Vital Fertility, where she helps couples optimize their health and fertility with a personalized, functional approach. Maria is also the co-founder of Health Reclaimed, a woman-led wellness company offering detox programs, transformational health journeys, and most recently, a gut restoration and nervous system reset retreat. A passionate advocate for women's wellness, hormonal balance, and conscious living, Maria blends her expertise with a deep love of nature, sustainability, and holistic healing. She's also a first-generation American, a mom of 2 daughters, and a world-traveling marine biologist. Hi, Maria.
Hi, so nice to see you today.
So you're also a marine biologist?
Yeah, prior to going into medicine, I was a marine biologist, yes.
That's amazing. How did you switch paths from that?
Yeah, so undergrad, I double majored in global studies and marine biology, and I also had a job on an ambulance as an EMT. So
Wow.
I always really loved helping people, and I thought the way I was going to help people was through environmentalism and really getting the word about how important our oceans were. And I taught marine biology, did research, set up marine protected areas, and there came a point like 5-6 years after undergrad, I was like, I don't really want to research anything. What do I want to do? And I ran into someone that was going to be going to PA school, and she told me about it. I had never heard what a PA was, and I was like, that's what I want to do. And just kind of, shifted courses a little bit. I had a lot of already stuff because of biology. You kind of already have a lot of classes. But I just did a post-bac program prior to PA school so I could get a couple of classes like anatomy and physiology that I was missing prior to applying to PA school.
Wow, that's neat.
Yeah.
So you have Vital Fertility as your main business at this point. And maybe we can touch on too a little bit, just like what is functional medicine, because it's something that I've dabbled in. I'm super interested in, although I don't have any certifications in it, but explain what that is too. And then what led you into the path of just like focusing on fertility.
Yeah, and I'm glad you asked that because a lot of people think they know what functional medicine is, but what they really know is integrative medicine, which is still a great practice, right? So with functional medicine, we're getting at the root cause of what's going on, right? Whether it's something in a gut imbalance, hormonal imbalance, cortisol levels are off, and we just dig as deep as possible and go as upstream as we can with testing, with lifestyle modification, and all those things. Whereas integrative medicine, you are doing other approaches that could potentially help, but you're really not understanding 100% what's going on. You might find out with it, but at the same time, you're just maybe adding lifestyle modifications, maybe some supplements, and maybe your plan's a little bit more comprehensive than regular allopathic treatment. So the main difference, I think, is just really getting to the root of what's going on and going upstream with functional medicine.
Yeah, the root cause, like that's the kind of the definition that people will say is like getting to that root instead of just like putting a Band-Aid on it with pharmaceuticals.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
We don't want to put a Band-Aid on stuff. We really want to figure out what's going on. Obviously, sometimes a Band-Aid is needed to progress with testing or treatment in functional medicine. Like, let's say someone has constipation. You don't want them being constipated while you're trying to figure out the root cause.
Mm-hmm.
We'll put something just to help with constipation and keep digging and digging. And we have allocated time to be able to do that versus when you're in regular practicing, like I was in family practice, I would have to see 22 patients, 15 minutes each. Just there's no time or space for it with the way that it's set up in allopathic medicine.
Right. I see that a lot when people are criticizing allopathic medicine too. Not all providers are jumping right to certain pharmaceuticals. But like you just said, there just isn't time. So they might want to get to the root cause or do this further, deeper digging, and they simply can't in the regular practice setting. So I think that's important too, because I feel like we're kind of blanket, targeted.
No, I definitely want to make sure that, we need allopathic medicine. If I get in a car crash, like I'm not going to do root cause medicine at that point, right? Like
Yeah.
we need allopathic medicine. I practiced it for 10 years and I was always trying to kind of put in integrative and alternative medicine with it. But there came a point where I was like, this isn't enough. Like I'm not getting what I want and having people heal. And the more I kept digging, I was like, no, I need to find a better route to help people.
Mm-hmm. And I've noticed, so you've started actually a wonderful PA community for functional medicine. I've noticed that in the past, like I've been practicing for 11 years now, and I've noticed that there's been a big shift, that a lot more people are getting into and interested in functional medicine, wondering how they can practice that way. Have you noticed that as well? And why do you think that's changing?
Oh yeah, for sure. That was the main reason I created the group because
Yeah.
people would keep coming to me and asking questions. And I was like, okay, I just need to create a space where we could just like learn from each other, and really just build on each other's experiences and really understand what is functional medicine, how we can apply it, whether we want to start our own business in functional medicine or maybe work with an ND or another doctor that's already practicing it. So I think the shift, we're in an age of information, right? Like it's almost like information overload almost.
Yeah.
Where it's easy to get stuff off TikTok, Instagram, AI, like it's a quick Google search now. And so I think what people are really looking for is like, yeah, we're kind of done putting that Band-Aid, right? Let's really work on restoring, and really healing the body so that we're not causing harm while we're, trying to get better. And I think people want that. My patients always wanted that, and that's why I was always a little bit more alternative. I think the hard part is that in allopathic medicine, sometimes we presume like the patient is not going to have the time or the discipline to do the work, but there's a lot of people that want to do the work. And so I wanted, that space is there now that we have like functional medicine or integrative medicine for people.
Yeah, I've found that so much too. I mean, I just try to incorporate a lot of dietary stuff and nutrition into my practice. I'm primarily dermatology, but so many people will say, well, patients aren't going to make that change. They just assume that it's too hard. And I've found quite the opposite. Oftentimes, especially people who have gone to multiple providers and have been unhappy or just haven't gotten their answers, their issues solved, they are willing to do that, or they're super excited that now they can take responsibility back and make some changes themselves. And I always say you can just lead a horse to water, right?
Yeah.
Like if they don't want to, great, but at least we gave them those options and gave them that information.
Yeah, it's very empowering for people to actually have those options and have them kind of decide on which route they want to go. And I love giving that option to people because at the end of the day, it's their health, right? They have to do the work. I can only make suggestions.
Yep. So I'd like to hear about the journey to a fertility practice. What inspired you to go that route and focus specifically on that?
Yeah. So it started with my own personal fertility struggle back in 2012. I always had irregular periods. I'd been on birth control for about 13 years. And they were regular, of course, when I was on birth control. And then, you get off birth control, you get married, and you're like, okay, what if we get pregnant? And it didn't happen. And I was like, what's going on? Right. And my cycles were irregular, like, things that just weren't working out. You could tell there was some hormonal things happening. And I went to my OB. At that point, I was 32 years old, and it was kind of a wait and see because I wasn't over 35, right? So you have to wait a whole year. And I started doing all the things that I knew to do, and I kept digging and digging, and I started finding information that I couldn't believe I didn't know, just how like birth control depletes, so many minerals and vitamins that are actually needed for fertility. And it causes gut dysbiosis, which is something that no one ever told me in PA school. And I felt really bad not knowing this information and not being able to tell patients at this point that, and so I started digging and digging, and I would get, my cycle would get better, but I still wasn't getting pregnant. There was nothing really showing me why I couldn't get pregnant. I had unexplained infertility. And on paper, I was perfect, right? Like perfect BMI. I was at the best health possible. I was doing Ironman. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, it was just one of those unexplainable things that I couldn't believe I wasn't getting pregnant. Like, it just was never crossed my brain. And so the more I started digging, I was like, okay, like I think I need to go into this functional route to really find out what's going on. I ended up having to do IVF to have that's why I call them miracle babies, because I had to do IVF to have my girls. And I'm so grateful for assisted reproductive technology, because I don't know if I would have had them had there not been that to choose from. But the more I, dug and tried to not do IVF, I was like, this is crazy. The research, the suggestions, there's like 500 supplements that help with fertility. Like the knowledge was overwhelming, and I'm a practitioner and I love digging. And I was like, I don't even know what it would be like to have to do this and not have the knowledge that I already knew. Yeah. So I said, this is what I'm supposed to do then. I'm supposed to really help people, like guide them through this journey of infertility and really get down and deep into the upstream causes of their infertility, because infertility is a canary in the coal mine. If you can't get pregnant, if you think about it biologically, that's what we're put here on Earth to do, like as a species. If you can't get pregnant, there's something wrong, right? Whether it's the male side or the female side, and maybe it's both a little bit, but you need to dig a little deeper. To me, it's not like, okay, let's just, do something so you can ovulate. Like, no, like what is going on that your body's not allowing you to get pregnant? Like, let's really figure this out, because that probably is going to remain there whether you get pregnant or not through IVF or maybe through IUI. So that's what spurred everything into me wanting to really just help people, because I felt like it was such an overwhelming experience for me that I couldn't imagine what it would be like for someone that didn't know about medicine and functional medicine trying to get pregnant.
So were things different back then than they are now as far as what was out there? There's a big push right now for women to eat organ meat and animal products for fertility. And I feel like maybe that wasn't quite as big back in 2012, but I'm not sure how that's changed in that field.
Yeah, I mean, like, no, never, that didn't come across anything I was reading. There were some studies on gluten-free and dairy-free having better outcomes with IVF. And that's when I was kind of like, okay, so my Ari, he is amazing. He's not functional, but he suggested that because of all of his time doing IVF, he saw that. He saw that the patients that were gluten-free and dairy-free were having better outcomes. So he, of course, wanted to make sure that his patients got that information. And so I don't think having organ meat or, eating liver or pate was a thing like it is now, but dietary changes for sure. If you were, I'm going to say this lightly, like if you were with someone that was a little bit more like open to it as well, instead of just doing the meds, right, to get you there.
Right. So is that the first place that you would start with patients now that you see? Like, do you start with diet with them, or kind of what's your like stepwise approach with someone who comes to you with infertility?
Yeah, so I have a program where we look at a couple different things, but first and foremost, food is medicine. So we really have to dig and look into food to see what's going on. There's a certain way that you can eat that can actually stabilize hormones, especially cortisol. Circadian rhythm is another big thing that people don't know about, or we don't realize because we're stuck indoors so much. And that really plays a huge role with hormone production. So making sure to tell people about that, like go outside 15 minutes if you're in office or in your home, like just literally get that sunlight in your retina so you can get those signals to produce the vitamin D, to produce your hormones, because that's what our body does naturally, right? And so supporting that with things like circadian rhythm, mitochondrial function, diet, lifestyle modification, and then digging further with labs if we need to find out what the core reason for infertility is. And going a little further, and I always see a male and female together, because a lot of the times the work is on the female, but the stats aren't there that it's just the female that causes infertility. It's about half, right? So we want to make sure that sperm can be optimized. And if it's not ideal, then go a little bit further to get some DNA fragmentation in the sperm.
Yeah, I'm reading more and more about how the male has such an effect on not just fertility, but actually the health of the baby as well, and the mother's pregnancy. Like I read something recently about hyperemesis gravidum, which for those who don't know is like the nonstop vomiting and nausea, like very severe quote unquote morning sickness, can come from the dad.
Yeah.
That's fascinating.
Yeah. So we kind of just say like, oh, it's the female carrying the baby. It's all whatever the female's health is, that's what's going to happen to the baby. But that's not the case, actually. The male have a really important role in it. And like you said, I recently found that paper too. And it's just amazing to see that we have to take care of both sides for the fertility to be able to come all the way through and have a great outcome.
So are most of your patients coming to you after they sort of exhausted allopathic options, or are they coming to you before they've even tried this just to like optimize their fertility? Where do you see, I'm sure you have the whole spectrum, but what's the majority?
A little bit of both, but I'm going to say it's, they've exhausted some allopathic medicine and they haven't really gotten to where they need to go, or they keep having recurrent pregnancy losses, or they're just not getting pregnant, right? And so a lot of things go into that, but one of the things is like the vaginal microbiome. Not a lot of OBs or REs are testing that, and that's like a whole new like window into what's going on, and that could have huge effects on fertility and making sure that you can carry out the pregnancy.
That's fascinating. Like, is it being too acidic for the sperm to survive or something beyond that?
A little bit of both, right? So pH has a huge role in that, but it's also if there are some bacteria that shouldn't be there, but they haven't been detected, or you don't have any symptoms, right? You go to your family practice OB, you get a urine test, it doesn't come out that you have BV or anything like that. But if we do a vaginal microbiome test, we can kind of see the levels and what's present. There's certain species that are pro-fertility and some that are kind of in the middle, like they just kind of balance each other out, and then there's some that are very anti-fertility. So that testing is actually really important if we're having like recurring pregnancy loss, or if they're just not getting pregnant, because there could just be an imbalance there that we're not aware of. And the vaginal microbiome is very correlated with the gut as well, because anatomically it's very close. So while we're working on the gut, I'm also looking at the vaginal microbiome at the same time to just improve the overall like space and the fertility outcomes.
Yeah, that was my next question was, are people who have that dysbiosis of the gut, is it usually they also have vaginal dysbiosis?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
There's definitely a correlation there. And even more so, like I can help my patients get pregnant, but I also want them to have a healthy baby. And the research shows that, the mom's vaginal microbiome has a huge role in the health of the baby for 1,000 days after they're born. And so making sure that that's also part of my treatment. It's not just, okay, you're pregnant, see you later. Like I want these outcomes to kind of last and have healthy babies from the pregnancies as well.
So besides diet, are there other things they're doing to bring those probiotics to the vagina? Like, is it like actual topical applications, or is it still more dietary stuff?
A little bit of both, right? And so there's like a kill protocol that I use to be able to make sure to get rid of things that are very anti-fertility. And then we want to really replenish the area and make sure that the pH is balanced. Yeah, and we do both oral and vaginal suppositories of anything that can really help support that.
Okay, cool. That's really neat. I haven't even heard of that as, just a fertility treatment that's so cool. So what about autoimmune conditions? I actually have a friend who's trying to get pregnant and kind of going through some of this and has lupus. So she wanted me to specifically ask about that. Is there a different approach in regards to autoimmune diseases, or are people with autoimmune diseases having a harder time getting pregnant?
Yeah, so autoimmune could definitely play a huge role in it. And I always check to make sure that there is no thyroid antibodies and positive ANAs. So making sure that that marker is not there. Because if it's there, it is going to be some sort of inflammation, right? Your body is always kind of fighting all that. So I want to bring the inflammation down as much as possible. I just had a patient, she's got hypothyroidism. Her antibodies before starting with us were at 70, nothing crazy, but now they're down to 10. And all we've really done at this point is lifestyle, like diet, and really working. I haven't specifically targeted the antibodies. We just switched around the diet for her. And so inflammation markers are already coming down and her thyroid antibodies are already coming down. So it makes a huge role if I can get those biomarkers a little bit down, like homocysteine, to really help people get pregnant, and there is low dose naltrexone, which a lot of people use. I feel like there's a space and time for it, but I'm not someone that, you've got autoimmune, like let's go low dose naltrexone, that should work. But that is something that could be applied as well if people have some sort of autoimmune condition for fertility.
Interesting. I know I read a lot about that, but not for fertility. So then do they stop it once they get pregnant?
Yeah.
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 Wow. What are the main dietary changes that you're making? So, I would say with Hashimoto's, we always think of gluten. I don't know if that's like primarily what you were talking about, but besides gluten and dairy, maybe sugar, what are some other things that you're really focusing on nutrition-wise for patients?
Yeah, great question. Because I feel like there's so many diets and food plans out there.
Yeah.
I know people's heads are like spinning. Like, what's the right one, right? Is it keto? Is it vegan? Is it vegetarian? And what we're really trying to do is really support hormone cycling, right? And hormone cycling works best if we're having whole foods. And I'm not specific, like, yes, you can't eat this. Yes, you can't eat that. It's literally about eating whole foods, really focusing on protein in the morning, protein at lunch, and complex carbohydrates in the evening. That's really going to help with cortisol levels. Once the cortisol cortisol, because that's like the base, the foundation of hormones. Once the cortisol levels are in good, like they're running well, then the rest of the hormones kind of start falling into place. While we're doing that, I also have them do a detox in there. And sometimes it depends on the type of detox on the patient. There's individual ones that I do, depending if they've got some sort of metabolic issues that are coming up, or if they've been exposed to parasites or mold. So it's like individual, but there is a detox phase where we're really just focusing on making sure that they're getting more a veggie diet, or maybe lesser calories, so we can kind of detox that part, and their body can really kind of go into working with the metabolism a little bit. So I can't say exactly because it always changes the detox that I do. And then part of that also is making sure to get a food sensitivity test, right? Because you can do all these dietary changes, and let's say on your food sensitivity test, it comes back positive for kale, right? And you're like, kale's amazing. Kale's a really good thing. And on a normal diet, you wouldn't take it out. But if we don't know you're sensitive to it, you're still going to keep having that reaction, that hyperactivity reaction, right? And so for me, that's one of the tests I think is super important to put on board for patients, just so that we can really even because food can be really healthy and not be eliminated normally. So knowing that sensitivity is there really helps us kind of guide that as well.
Is that an IgA sensitivity test?
Yeah.
What is that? Yeah. Okay.
The LPET test. Yeah.
I've had that done a long, long time ago, and some really weird stuff did come up, and I was questioning it because, it was like beets, which I actually did end up cutting out because I was like, maybe this is causing a lot of problems, but now I still wonder, like, oh, should I try eating beets again? But now it's been so many years, I feel like I probably caused a reaction to them. But what is like the reaction that people are having? So I think you said hyperactivity. I mean, but did you just mean like hypersensitivity to the specific food? What's happening with that?
It's just like the immune system is in hyperactivity mode, right? It's kind of like,
Okay.
this is a foreign body, like this shouldn't be here, like what's going on? And so everything just kind of gets revved up.
Yeah.
And so it's just one of those where you want to bring that all the way down as much as possible so that fertility can happen, right? Because if
Yeah.
there's a tiger chasing you and your body's in like, we've got these things that shouldn't be in here and I'm attacking that, you're not going to get pregnant, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like it's literally about it's like a whole body system thing when you look at it. It's not just like, oh, this is the food that's the trigger. It's really not the food. I mean, it is and it isn't. It's like this weird it's what the body is doing to that triggering food, like where your body is in this hyperactive state and it's not allowing for maybe implantation to happen because it's fighting off all this inflammation that's happening because of this.
Yeah. Yeah. And then when you get pregnant, I mean, this is like a foreign thing that sometimes the mother's body is just attacking that anyway. So if you have this like hyper intense autoimmune inflammatory response, then that makes sense that it would be also targeting possibly the embryo.
Yeah.
So also that makes sense for with autoimmune diseases. I mean, we know about all this stuff, like you're saying, food can cause or lower inflammation. And I find that sometimes people do get confused with that because people also like to they like the things they like. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
They like to do what they want to do and they don't want to be told that they can't do it. So sometimes they want it to be a little more complicated than it is. Or for example, I have this autoimmune condition. So therefore, it doesn't matter what I eat because I have this condition, but we're saying, no, the food is contributing to it. Like if you're eating highly processed, highly inflammatory food, you're exacerbating your autoimmune condition, worsening, increasing your overall inflammation and lowering your chance of getting pregnant overall.
Yeah, exactly. Because we really want to heal the gut as much as possible and decrease that inflammation. And once that happens, I mean, like my patients can reintroduce food like that on the list. There's like a severe, moderate, mild kind of ranking of the foods. And then there's like the green one where everything's okay. And so there is a way to reintroduce this food. It doesn't mean like, oh, forever and ever, but you really have to heal the gut so that you can bring that back without it causing the inflammation that the body is going through.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, this is kind of a personal question, so if you don't have to share if you don't want to, but at the point where you're only 32 and you're super healthy and athletic, what was the issue, or what did you kind of figure out was the change that needed to happen?
Yeah, so I went gluten-free, dairy-free, alcohol-free, which is obvious, but sometimes really hard for people.
Yeah.
And to this day, like I have a sense of little things that were happening. That's the thing with fertility. If fertility is like this iceberg, right? So we have the tip right here and we're like, oh, we cannot get pregnant. That's the tip. But there could be underlying issues like things going on with mitochondria, right? Things that are going on with toxin exposure. When I look back, I had allergies growing up, right? So I had allergies and asthma. That's as a 6-year-old. Like that shouldn't happen. Like that's something new. Like if we were to go back like 50 years, most kids didn't have asthma and allergies. And so my immune system, there was something going on with my immune system. So I think part of it was that my immune system was hyperactive, as well as, my hormones were out of whack from being on birth control for so long. And I was depleted. I also had MTHFR. So I was depleted with a lot of the nutrients that the birth control was, stopping, like selenium, zinc, the B vitamins. And I didn't know this. So I had to take methylated Bs. I found that out and things just slowly started improving. But at the end of the day, I didn't get this full testing that I do for my patients because functional medicine really wasn't around at the time. It was because it started in 1991, but it wasn't like I didn't know anyone that was doing that testing.
Yeah, harder to find practitioners.
Yeah. And I live in California in Santa Cruz where we're very like, I was able to in my family practice talk about homeopathy in my regular FQHC. Like I could write it in my notes and everything.
That's amazing.
So, like, so we're very like forward with that, but I still couldn't find somebody that was doing functional testing really at that point. So I was grateful that the RE that I found was integrative and was willing to help do these little things that I feel like made the difference that I was able to have my babies through IVF, Who knows if I hadn't made those changes, if that would have happened.
Yeah. I think like your overall approach, I actually read a book recently called The Primal Feast by Susan Allport, which was written in 2000. And when reading this book, it's all the stuff that is like coming up today and is super relevant. And I was like, wow, she was so ahead of the curve with this. But it was talking about animals too, and fertility and how they can get pregnant and how females have to eat this like large variety of foods and also have a certain amount of body fat. Optimal nutrition is like the key to fertility, even for animals, or I think it was primates she was specifically talking about in this portion. And so that's another factor is under eating. Have you encountered this with some of your patients as well?
To a degree, but I'm gonna say usually it's the other way around. Yeah. You do get those people that are like athletes that are really on top of it. And most of it, like I'm thinking of one patient right now, she's a vet, and it's not that she's under eating, she's just so busy. She's literally so busy with her work right now, especially because it's the season where the babies, the little animals are being born, that she's like, I'm like, well, this is it. Like, you have to make the time to meal plan. Like, you have to pick a day and meal plan and have that solid food instead of just eating a bar and going on the go because it's like the go, 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 right? And when she's not in her stressful time at work, she eats amazing. But it's like if we don't plan for it, then like by default, you're either going to eat something that's processed and not good for you, and it's probably going to be inflammatory. So I think planning is key for whichever side you fall on, the under eating or overeating.
Yeah.
Because the easy food is not good for you, like in general,
And and it's so stressful to the body. So like you're saying, that kind of go, 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 which is modern society for most of us, is so stressful. And then the body's like running around, barely eating, high cortisol. Like then it's not conducive to having a baby, and our bodies know I'm ready and I'm able, or I'm not.
Yeah. You touched on that because that was something that I forgot to bring up for myself because I was always go, go, go.
Yeah.
And very type A, like I think a lot of practitioners are.
Yeah.
I had to reduce my hours at work, which is crazy to think of, but I had to just like allow myself that space to just be present and work on things like meditation and really move the system into rest and digest, right? Into parasympathetic. Because when it's sympathetic and it's going, there is no space for baby to come. And I do see that a lot, and part of it, I think it's different prongs from it, right? Part of it's the go, go, go. Part of it is the fact that we don't live with the sun anymore. Like we don't have that circadian biology telling us what to do. We're up late night, catching up on charts or whatever. And we're getting exposed to blue light, which screws with melatonin and cortisol. So it's kind of like the lifestyle that we're at. And I have to tell patients this all the time. Like I had to cut my hours by, I was at 40 to 45. I had to cut them down to 30. And it was a temporary thing, but it's something that you don't realize the impact because stress is so, what's the word I'm looking for? Like you can't really pinpoint it, right? Like it's not like, but it makes a huge difference in your body and the physiology and the way that everything's happening in the body. And so if we can remove the stressors, things just kind of start happening and the body starts healing itself and going back to balance.
Mm-hmm. And what I was asking right before that, although this really goes hand in hand, is sleep.
Yeah.
The sleep quality and getting a good amount of sleep. How do you address that?
Yeah, I always tell people it's not even about the quantity of sleep, like 6, 7, 8 hours. It's literally about the quality of sleep. So, definitely recommend people to get 7+ hours. And with females, it's going to range a little bit depending on their cycle. They might need a little bit more going into their menses because they're going to, like, you want to build up the reserves when the menses is there. But it's about the quality versus the quantity, because you could say, okay, I'm going to go to bed at 2 a.m. and get my 7 hours that way. But between the hours of 1 a.m. and 3 a.m., that's when a lot of the detoxification pathways are working and your body is resetting itself. So really getting to sleep between 9:30 and 10:30, like the latest, is ideal, because so that your body can do what it needs to do when it's resting, versus like, okay, I'm still going to get those, 7, 8, 9 hours, but I'm going to go to bed at midnight or 1 in the morning and wake up later. It's not the same. It's not equivalent. So definitely quality over quantity first, and then making sure that they're getting 7 to 9 hours of sleep.
That's really interesting. I mean, I don't go to bed super late. I go to bed probably like an old person, very early, like when my kids go to bed. But that's good to know, because I'm sure a
Yeah.
lot of people think that, are people who just work late nights, like for their job, and then think, well, I'm going to make up for it in the morning, that it's their circadian rhythm is still completely off.
Yeah, or you're staring at your phone, catching up with Instagram or whatever, and
Yeah.
that direct blue light has a huge influence in that, right? So your melatonin levels are going to start going down. Melatonin and cortisol are like a little seesaw, right? And
Mm-hmm.
we get the signals from the sun, like specifically the sunset. Those colors, the red, the pinks, the oranges that we see at sunset, that's what really activates that melatonin to really start rising and the cortisol to come down. And so if we're not seeing that because we're not outside, and then we get blue light after that because we come home and we're like eating and watching, our phone, then you're kind of just screwing all that all that up.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. I know. I want to get someone on here sometime who like just does circadian rhythm stuff and like go on a deep dive in that, because there's so many fascinating things about that, and I'd love to go even more into that. What else about fertility? Is there anything else, like testing wise? Like, what about Dutch tests? Are you doing that for people?
No, definitely. I feel like the Dutch test is very important. It really gives me like a good look at what's happening with the metabolism of the estrogen, where the detoxification pathways are working or not working. If I add the adrenal component to that, I also get to see what's happening with the cortisol, what's happening
Mm-hmm.
with the adrenals, if cortisol is actually converting. So I feel like it's really important to get the Dutch as well, because it just kind of, okay, maybe that's not, sometimes it's not the hormones itself that we need to fix, because if we can fix the underlying stuff, the hormones fall into place. But it does allow me to kind of help to know where I need to boost, or we might need to kind of change a couple things, especially if they're not detoxifying in the way that they should be.
Mm-hmm. Do you ever work with people like PMS or perimenopause, or are you just really totally focused on fertility?
My idea was not to work with that, but as I myself have gotten into perimenopause, and over the last, 2 years or so, and my all my friends were all in the same boat right now. People kept asking me like, "Oh my gosh, like I need help. I'm having hot flashes, I
Yeah.
can't sleep." Da, da, da. And so I'm definitely getting certified in the area and helping people. I'm actually having an event in my clinic tomorrow night. I think there's like 20 moms coming, and we're just going to talk about what happens, when we start getting into our 40s, what happens with that estrogen, what happens with the progesterone, because there's a big shift. And I think it comes down to the lecture that I'm going to give. It's really interesting. And we all know this. But, as we get into our 40s, the estrogen is going to start, progesterone, estrogen start declining. Estrogen kind of goes a little bit crazy. We start maybe getting some acne, we might get some hard time falling asleep, maybe more breast tenderness, maybe our libido is off. But the one thing I think for me that I feel like is not apparent, because we could do like BHRT, right? We can just add something. And again, we're just masking the symptom. Like we need to really like find out what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
And when we are going into our 40s and 50s, the hormone production is no longer really coming from the ovaries. There's a huge shift to the adrenals, huge. Like I'm talking like most of it's made from the ovaries, and then all of a sudden we get what we call adrenopause. Then it starts going over to the adrenals now. And if your adrenals are in the tank, what do you think is going to happen? Like it's just going to be like crazy. You're going to have all the symptoms and you're going to feel like an erratic mess. And
Mm-hmm.
so really focusing again on those adrenals and the cortisol and making sure that everything's working there so that you can balance yourself out. Because what we see is if we look at other cultures, like everyone goes to perimenopause and menopause, but the symptoms that American females feel is quite different than what women in other cultures feel. And I think it's because of our adrenal state going into perimenopause.
Yeah. Because again, it's that like burnout, like high stress, tons of caffeine.
Yeah. Dehydrated, not
Burning them
sleeping.
out. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So do you find that that also affects PMS? And I'm only asking because I have horrible PMS. I actually don't have like almost no physical symptoms, but all like in the past it's getting better, but like rage, like almost like PMDD actually, because I'll get like severe brain fog, sometimes depression, like super angry, just not myself at all for like 1 week. And then as soon as my period comes, I'm like completely fine.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
Yeah. So for me, I would love to do a Dutch on you and just see what's happening with your estrogen.
I had one actually like last year and it didn't really show much. And that was like maddening. I was like, oh, I wanted to have like some like really concrete info.
Yeah. Yeah.
And now I can't remember. I think the cortisol was a tiny bit high, but like all the hormones were like right on track. And I was just like, like I just thought that there'd be something a little bit off.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's really maybe they were fine, but you really need to look at the detoxification pathways because there's three ways that it could go. And depending on which one it's going, you want to make sure that it's going through the one that it's working the best to be able to really clear out the estrogen, even though it probably looked fine in the number, but it's really about, and the little pie chart, really seeing what's happening and where the percentages of where the detoxification is happening. Because if it's going through one of the pathways that's not good, then some of the symptoms are going to start showing up and you can just support that. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I'll have to look back at that. I should have looked at it before I talked to you. It's been a while. That's not my specialty at all. And I did have a functional medicine provider who was great, I was working with, but I was taking, cortisol manager by Integrative Therapeutics, I think.
Yeah.
Which did seem to really help. And I would kind of like go on and off of that. And now I've found Shatavari?
Right.
I found that to be super helpful if I just take it that week.
Yeah.
But I found with patients, because a lot of patients ask me, especially for acne and hormonal acne, ask if they should take Vitex. And I always feel like a little hesitant too, because just like you're saying, I don't want to just blanket treat hormones and things that regulate hormones without really knowing what's going on with them. So I'm not a huge fan of doing that, but I know people who on their own have sort of like taken it upon themselves to try them and had good results with it.
Yeah. Yeah. Another thing you could try is licorice tea. So that's really good for cortisol levels as well, and to really help bring that up a little bit. And so that's something that I feel like is a benign to make a suggestion for your patients or something, because that will help the cortisol levels.
I think, does the licorice root increase testosterone too?
A little bit, but not much where I would be nervous about it. I mean, they probably would have to be drinking gallons of it throughout the day. But it has a little, it's a little bit, but not where it's like, okay, this is going to directly influence that.
Yeah. So for people who maybe are just starting out on their fertility journey or don't maybe have the funds really to be completely working with a functional medicine provider or all the tests, where it's like just sort of like, this is baseline, this is what I would start with.
Yeah. I feel like when I look back at all my patients, the one thing that everyone needs to work on is what we talked about was the nervous system, right? Because if you step back and if the nervous system is tired and wired and overworked, even if you have the cleanest diet, you're not going to absorb the nutrients that you're eating. B, like all the testing in the world you could do, but if, your nervous system is out of whack and you're really not allowing the healing to happen, then you can have these results, but the things that you're implementing aren't really working. So if anyone has no money, the first thing I say is like literally look at yourself and try some mind body techniques, whether it's, meditation, yoga, even things like that I started doing was drawing, right? So I am really big into energy healing, hence why I love homeopathy so much. And when I had someone read me, they were like, okay, you're really good around the abdominal area, but there's something happening in your womb, right? That's where the baby comes in, the creative forces. Try something creative. And I'm like, well, I'm not creative at all. Like, I hate arts. Like, it gets messy and like, I'm wasting my time. But that suggestion really shifted for me, and I got one of those mandala coloring books, and I just sit outside in the sun and really just like, okay, this is like me just being in my space and being present. And I feel like whatever you can do to be present in your space is really important because we don't get that these days. And and I would say like sleep. Those are the two things that are fairly easy to make changes without having to cost much, right? Like, and then once I feel like the sleep and the nervous system is good, then all the other stuff can be added and it might cost a little bit, right? Like going organic versus just doing conventional foods. And that way you know that you're actually absorbing the nutrients that you're eating and you're not just throwing money away for to say, you know?
Yeah. And just like whole food diet, as unprocessed as possible. We're
Yeah.
not recommending cutting out gluten or dairy, just like blanket for everybody.
Yeah, I mean,
Or
like,
I don't know. Yeah.
we can. We know the studies show that, but sometimes it's really hard for people to cut out gluten, even though nowadays, compared to when I first started, there's so many options like gluten-free bread, gluten-free pasta. But what I used to tell, like when my family practice patients, I was like, if it has an ingredient list, and it has a label, it's really not a whole food. Like we want vegetables, we want things that come from the earth. We want things that come from an animal. Like I really focus on that. And yes, every once in a while have something that has like a food label on it, but it really should, like if it does have a food label, the ingredient should be 1, 2, 3 max. Because once we start getting into like the list of ingredients, it's more processed.
And I'm amazed by how many people don't read ingredient labels.
Yeah. Yeah, I know.
Because I've been gluten-free for a long, long time now. And I have people like bring me stuff being like, oh, they said it was gluten-free. But then you read it and it's like still a bunch of garbage or it will say protein, but then it's just like they added whey protein to a bunch of other crap.
Yeah.
I mean, and I'm like, you have to read the ingredients. Like there's just so many bad things and stuff that sometimes looks, it's greenwashed and it looks like it's healthy, but it's not.
Yeah. And just gluten-free is not like healthy, right? Like,
right, exactly.
I mean, like, so you really have to dig a little bit deeper. And I always tell people too, like even the way that the ingredients are listed, right? So they're listed in order of abundance, right? So if the first ingredient is water and then you've got sugar, that even though like water is first, sugar is right there, right next to it, right? And so like if there is going to be sugar, let's say, like maybe it's down number, 15 and maybe that's okay, but not really because we're getting down to ingredient number 15. So it's going to be really processed, But even that, and I feel like that's something which is such a disservice to people in general, is that we weren't taught that in health class in 8th grade, high school, which, I would sit with my patients in family practice and go over that as well as the menstrual cycle. And people thought I was crazy. I was like, no, we need to know this. Like, this is important. Like, this is our fuel. And we also need to know what our menses are doing. And this is like right before I put them on birth control, which was so kind of ironic because we're literally shutting it down. But I would say like, hey, like once you come off, you need to know like what your body's doing. You need to kind of really be able to gauge what the hormones are doing because it's kind of it's our female's body like check-in, right? Like if your menses is off for whatever reason, if you're bleeding throughout or if you're spotting throughout, that something is not right. And it's like our body, like our sixth vital sign, I really wish that we would implement that a little bit more.
Yeah, I know Chinese medicine does because my friend's an acupuncturist, and every time I would go to her, she would ask those questions. Yep. So definitely other forms of medicine have been on that. I did want to go back to, you said that the birth control, I don't know if you said the birth control pill or just hormonal birth control in general can cause gut dysbiosis. What is the mechanism for that?
Yeah, that has to do with estrogen detoxification. And so if there's any kind of interruption in the lining, the lining in the gut is very, very thin. And so if there's any kind of disruption with that, the hormone birth control can really cause that. And it'll have you retain some of the estrogen and you're not properly detoxifying it. Plus, it's already not allowing you to absorb folate, B6, B12, selenium, zinc, all these amazing minerals that are needed for the process of detoxification through phase 1 and phase 2.
And that's all hormonal birth control. Like if it's
I mean, you can, I think the copper IUI is the only one that would be okay, but then there's other issues with that as well. So,
interesting. What about exercise? So we know we don't want to over exercise because then that's going to kind of cause the same issues and raise cortisol and stress for the body. But is there any new research on perhaps strength training or like certain exercises that are most supportive for getting pregnant?
So when we think about pregnancy, one of the things is we want the nutrients to get where they need to go, right? And so I think movement and exercise are really important. I'm not one to say like, okay, the study came out that doing HIIT exercises like causes, increase in fertility, because what if you don't like doing HIIT exercises? Like, it doesn't make sense for me to suggest that. So I always ask the patient, like, hey, like, what are the things that you like to do to stay active, right? And so I go more on that route versus like what the studies show for fertility, knowing that it also me explaining to them that, you know, we need circulation, we need fluid. So making sure that people are adequately hydrated to be able to get the nutrients where they need to go in the endometrial lining, right? So that any kind of flow or movement or exercise, like I'm for, like whatever the patient's going to do, whether the studies show like yoga or HIIT is better, like to me, I don't really look at that because I want to know what you as a patient are going to be able to actually complete, right? Because that's the important part to me, is to really improve the circulation as much as possible.
So just exercise in general, because we want to be getting some form of exercise, which is also anti-inflammatory, right?
Yeah.
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 So, okay. Yeah. That makes sense.
That's just my take on it. I'm sure there's like people that are like, well, you know, this part of your menses you should be doing, and it kind of does correlate. You want to be more active certain times and not. But at the same time, like I could tell you all the things, and like you said, take you know the horse to drink water. Like, what do you like to do? What do you enjoy? Because again, that vitamin J, right? That joy part, whatever that person's going to find so much joy in doing, they're going to get better results from it, and they're going to be more compliant with doing it. So I always ask them first before, you know, before kind of interjecting with any kind of the science that's showing like this is good and this is bad, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Yep, that's a great approach. So I want to segue into the homeopathy.
Yeah.
I have, my background is more herbalism, like, so totally different. And I find, again, sort of like we were talking about with functional medicine, but this is even more common. Most people do not know what homeopathy is.
Yeah.
They confuse it with naturopathy and they confuse it with herbalism, and they think that it's like a blanket term for holistic. All things holistic is homeopathic, and it's a totally different thing. So I really want to talk about that. What actually is homeopathy?
Yeah. No, that's a great question. And you're right. Unfortunately, not a lot of people know about it. If we were to go to India, if we were to go to Europe, most people in Europe actually have an allopathic doctor and a homeopathic doctor. Homeopathy is so amazing. And I feel like as time goes on, we're going to get a little bit more understanding of how it works. And that's part of the reason why people don't know about it, because it was literally ruled to be quackery or pseudoscience when it first came out, right? So when Dr. Hahnemann created homeopathy, it was kind of almost by mistake that he created it. And what happened is, if we look back into the early 1900s when the Flexner report came in, right? I don't know if your clients or your patients or your viewers know about the Flexner report. It's when they were trying to standardize all medical schools or medical teachings. A lot of holistic teachings had been working in the United States for a long time, like homeopathic medical schools and homeopathic hospitals, pretty much got pushed to the side and were considered pseudoscience. To the point where like there was hospitals that had homeopathy, they had light therapy, they had the top of the hospitals were open for fresh air, and that all got reversed with the Flexner report. And so unfortunately in the United States, that kind of pushed homeopathy to the side where people don't know about it. Or every time that it does come out in the news, it's the FDA has said that homeopathy is, you know, doesn't work and there could be side effects from it. Where my personal experience with homeopathy is that it's been nothing but amazing. It's really helped people in different areas. I worked with a classical homeopathic doctor for about 5 years coming out of PA school. I had no idea what homeopathy was, and I just happened to apply to his job. He had a Center of Integrative Medicine, and I'm like, how do I not know about this? Like, how come like this wasn't taught, like no one told me about this? And I started digging a little deeper, and he's a classical homeopathic doctor. So I went to go get trained in clinical homeopathy, which is a little bit different, because I didn't want to go to 4 more years of schooling, because it's like medical school. And so homeopathy is where you're treating like with like. And when the way that it was proven was that if you would take a substance, so there's like what we call the mother tincture, right? So whether it's a plant, a mineral, an animal, and there's an essence, or an energy, right? And that is put into these little pellets, and they're successed, which means that they're shaken vigorously, and depending on the potency of the remedy, the higher the potency, like let's say 200, that's going to be a deeper kind of working in the body versus like a 6 or 9C or 30C. And that also depends on the amount of successing that happens with the remedy. So I use clinical homeopathy because I'm not trained in classical. And one of the biggest differences I could kind of tell people who don't know about homeopathy, it's kind of like when you think about Ayurvedic medicine, right, or Chinese medicine, there's constitutions, right? There's people that might be Pitta or Veda. And so there's these characteristics of your personality and your health that are affected by homeopathy and and all the things that you would be giving it. And so in classical homeopathy, you kind of want the whole body in line, and then all the things that are not working kind of balance themselves out. Whereas in clinical homeopathy, which is a little bit more of what I do because that's what I got trained in versus me, with a doctor, um, it's like, okay, like I had an allergic reaction. My eyes are super puffy. I have no idea what I ate. I don't know if it was something that bit me. I'm going to take Apis, which comes from bees, and literally within minutes, that puffiness is going to go down. And so I didn't have to take an antihistamine. I didn't have to do anything pharmaceutically to stop the process. I really just helped my body to come into balance, right? So it's almost like you are healing the body in a energetic field versus like putting something that's going to stop a biological process. It lets the body.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
It just gives it like the because your body wants to heal, right? So it's literally
Yeah.
about giving it like that thing that it needs to kind of just sort it out and work its way out.
But is there a tiny amount of the chemical or the substance itself? Because I always thought that it was like when you said like treats like if you're having a cough, you're going to take this tiny amount of something that causes a cough. Is that correct?
Yes and no, because if that's why a lot of people call it crockery because you can't find it. Like it's an imprint, it's an energetic imprint of whatever that, let's say like the cinchona bark tree, right? Like it's literally the imprint of that. So if you were to look under a microscope, you wouldn't be able to find it. But we know it's there because people have reactions and effects from it. And
So it's
so
like flower essences.
yes, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow, I didn't know that. I thought there
Yeah.
was actually a little tiny amount of the thing in every one.
No, it's an imprint of it's an energetic imprint of what it is, whether it be a mineral, a plant, or an animal.
And so you personally have felt that this works like if you have this symptom and you take how quickly do you feel the result?
Yeah, it really depends if I've got the right one, right? So my
Hmm.
kiddos are sick right now, and what's amazing about homeopathy is that it's safe for pregnancy, it's safe for kids. So it's wonderful to have around. I have my little kits that I have everywhere when we travel, just in case. And really, like they've got fevers right now, fever ranging from 101 to 104, and depending if there's thirst associated, if there's a need for wanting to stay still or wanting to move, I'm going to use different remedies that go along with fever, and then you kind of have to sort of figure out what type of fever it is and how the body is reacting to it.
And so it can't be a placebo effect because like if you treat the kids and they don't know and it works.
I mean, and people do it on their pets, like on dogs, right? So if like
Yeah.
a dog who has no idea and you see the dogs get better, like I don't know.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's fascinating. My mind is blown right now because I really always thought that. I thought it was so interesting. And that made sense to me too, though, that even if it was these tiny amounts, that it's sort of like triggering the body to say, oh, I'm getting this tiny exposure of this thing that I need to fix. But if it's causing the thing that already is happening, it's going to focus its efforts on healing and quote unquote fixing that issue. But this is just the energetic imprint of that. So how do we know that the places making these products are actually doing it?
Well, I mean, you have to go with a reputable place, right? Like I use Boron or Hahnemann. Hahnemann is in Marin in California, but Boron is French. And so I am not someone that say like whatever homeopathy like distribution center that you want, like no, like you have to go with reputable brands. But also if you ever travel to Europe, just go into a pharmacy and see what they have there and talk to the pharmacist because sometimes they actually have some training in homeopathy and they can kind of help you out like that as well. There are certain brands that people know to use that you get results from, right?
Mm-hmm. So it's much more common in other countries than it is here.
Oh
And
yeah.
what was that thing you said about the medical schools? What was it called?
Oh, the Flexner report.
So that only happened in the United States?
Yes. So that was funded by the Carnegie and Rockefeller. And I think it was like I want to say like early 1900s, so maybe 1908, 1910 around then. And it was about standardizing medical schools and what was going on. And that's where pharmaceuticals started coming in. Rockefeller had a lot of say in petroleum, right? That was his industry. And so when the pharmaceuticals started coming on board, he was a big proponent for all the reforms that had been found through the Carnegie Foundation when they did the Flexner report.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's wild. That's awful too. Like we actually had some more integrative and holistic practices that got
Yeah.
taken away.
I mean, even here in San Francisco, so not UCSF per se, but there was a college that was a medical school that was homeopathy. And you could go to UCSF and go to the library and actually see a lot of the textbooks and stuff that they used. And it merged with the School of California, like medical school, but it wasn't UCSF yet at that point. And so it was something that was fairly common. And there was a lot of doctors like that were homeopaths and they were getting great results. And it was kind of I'm not going to say the main, but it was fairly high up there with the way that people were getting treated. Like I said, because there's no side effects to children or to pregnant women. So it's okay, right? Whereas with pharmaceuticals, you have to worry about that. There's some that you can't take when you're pregnant or breastfeeding, or you don't want to give to a child. So, yeah, it's a sad thing, but I'm hoping that as, integrative medicine and functional medicine kind of get more widespread, people will be open to trying different things and not look at as quackery or pseudoscience, especially like you said, like where we have these effects that children and pets are having it, right? So it's like we know that it works, and I know in science, because we have to have double-blind studies and we have to make sure that everything's standardized. I think the hard part with that, which I'm all for, is that we miss a lot because there's so much that we don't know yet when it comes to quantum biology. And we're just starting to really understand what that is and how it works and mind, body, and all those things. So I'm hoping that with this age of information, people are going to be more open, and patients want it. Patients want to know what else is out there that could help them before going to treat an ill, like a pill for their ill.
Mm-hmm. I love this stuff because if it can't hurt, it can only help, as long as there's no harm factor to it. So you're saying like, it's just these energetics. You can believe in it or you cannot believe in it. So it's worth trying.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's one that I used to love all the time when I had allergies before I had healed my gut, was called Allium cepa, which comes from onion. So what does an onion do? It makes you water, it makes it runny. And so I would take Allium cepa and all of a sudden like, oh, my nose isn't running. Like, how is that possible? Like,
Wow.
and once your body gets better and it starts healing, you might not have to use homeopathy as much, but it's really amazing to have, especially if you've got little ones, because children are really sensitive to homeopathy. And so you don't really need to dose them as often, or you don't have to go with high doses for things to work when it comes to like fevers and coughs. Or they get bit by a bug and it's super itchy. Like Apis works really, really well for that, or they get a puncture wound, or they're going to get a vaccine, you want to get maybe some arnica on board before, so they don't have that huge localized skin reaction. So there's so many things that it could be used for that to me, it's absurd that we're not implementing it more, because it can go adjunctly with pharmaceuticals. It's one of those like, maybe you have an ear infection and you might need antibiotics, even though most ear infections are viral. But let's say it's been 10 days and that ear infection's not going, you're not getting rid of it because it's more of a sinus ear infection. But you can do certain things to really help reduce the pain and the redness and some of the swelling and throbbing that a little kid is feeling that you don't like. Sometimes you just feel so helpless with kids.
Yeah.
And so giving the homeopathic remedies can really just kind of bring them to a level where they're not having to struggle and deal with it. And then if the antibiotics need to get on board, they can be put on board as well. So you can also take homeopathic remedies with pharmaceuticals.
Right. Absolutely. And so as a provider, and maybe for other people who aren't medical providers, where can we learn more about this? Like, what was the certification program you did, and how could we like learn more about homeopathy?
Yeah, so it was CEDH, and you can just Google that. It's Center of Education, Development of Clinical Homeopathy.
Okay.
You do have to be a practitioner to take it, but I think practitioner could be an acupuncturist, or it doesn't have to be MD, DOPA, NP. Like you could just any type of practitioner, I feel like it would be okay. I took this course back in 2017, so it's been a while. I don't know what the requirements are at this point, but back then that's what it was. And it was in person. I think now they're mostly online. But, there's, I want to say his name's Dana Ullman. He has, I think, 3 or 4 different books, and I can verify that. But those are books that I think every mom should have, because they're homeopathics that help with children and what's going on with, the colds, the fevers, the diarrhea, the stomach aches, all those things.
Awesome. I'm definitely going to look into this. I'm super intrigued even more than before now.
I mean, I love homeopathy because it's safe, effective, and it really just helps the mind, body, and spirit, right? It treats the whole person. And so it's such a powerful tool that I feel like as a mom, as a practitioner, that we have in our pocket. And I'm all about having as many tools in our tool shed to really help people. Because not all remedies work for everyone, and
Right.
so it's one more thing that if I could help one person this way, like, why not? Why would I not try something that could potentially help? And if it doesn't work, that's okay. We can move on to something else.
Yeah. And I love that with herbalism too. And then to add this into my, repertoire for my family is we exhaust all the things possible before we move to pharmaceuticals within reason, and I know not everyone has that medical background to know, this is safe versus this is not safe. So there's a lot of just anxiety with rushing kids into the doctor, but so many things, and most things are viral that we're dealing with as far as kids sicknesses, can be, you have to wait it out, but we can support the immune system and help this get, resolved a little bit faster. Before jumping right to antibiotics or something like that. So, which I think that, I'm going to keep adding all these things I can do. And I see that work. I see that work all the time. I'm always so excited, even though we should know that this works, with the herbal stuff, when I I'm treating myself and my kids and then being oh, we're all better now. And everyone else who had this, went right to the doctor and got an antibiotic on day 1 because they felt so crappy that they didn't need it. And we were able to resolve this without doing that. It always makes me so happy.
You could get an antibiotic and it'll work, but then what does it do to your gut? Then you've got to work on restoring your gut, and that's a whole other thing. So why not try to avoid that? And of course, if antibiotic is needed, great, we have that option. But trust the body, trust that it wants to heal, and just give it what it needs so that it can restore itself into balance.
Yeah. Yep. Well, I know we're kind of coming to the end of our time, but do you want to talk about the retreat you have coming up?
Oh, yeah, thanks. Yeah, so along with 4 other practitioners, we're all physician assistants, we're all into functional medicine. Some of us, so one of them does derm, the other one does autoimmune, brain health, gut health. I mean, we all kind of start with the gut, but we have our little niches, right? And so we decided how amazing it would be if we could just have a space to really heal the gut and restore the nervous system. Because what I said before is we can do all the protocols for the gut, but if your nervous system is out of whack, it doesn't really take its full effect.
Mm-hmm.
And so at the retreat, we're really looking at having some workshops to explain this to anyone who's willing to open it, to be open to receiving it, right? So gut restoration sometimes can be probiotics, but it's really not about that, right? It's really about the diversification in the gut and making sure to heal it with maybe some herbs, maybe some supplements and whole foods, all these little things that you might have heard here and there, but really just focus on that and then really reset the nervous system, right? And so we're looking at different modalities to help reset the nervous system. So I have a couple things that I'm bringing to the retreat. So I have a lymphatic machine that really helps move the body because it'll increases circulation of the lymphatic system 3 times what a normal person could do with their own hands. And it really moves the body into parasympathetic because of the pressure that you're feeling. I mean, it's a soft, warm hug feeling is what you're feeling, but because of the way it works. And that's something when I tried the machine, I was oh my God, everyone needs to feel this good. It feels so good. And meditative practices and breath, right? Working on the vagus nerve, because at the end of the day, really we're born, and the first thing that we do is we breathe. That's our first thing, is that big cry, big breath. And at the end of life, what is the last thing is the breath, right? You have your last breath before you pass away. And so to ignore the breath would be so silly, because it really spans our lifetime completely. And what we don't realize is that throughout the day, we don't breathe correctly, and we don't breathe enough in Western society because our nervous system is so out of whack. Tracy, who's the director of SAFM, which is the functional medicine school I went to, she said, I could literally solve most of people's problems if I could teach them to not mouth breathe at night. And when she said that to me, I was like, what does she mean? I know what she meant, but then she started digging into it, right? So when you are mouth breathing, when do you mouth breathe naturally, right? When you're running, when you're active, when you're cortisol levels are up. And so how many people do you know that mouth breathe at night? Probably a few, right? And so
one of my sons does.
So
I'm like scared to mouth tape him though, because I'm like, he's a kid. What if I suffocate him?
So I feel like that breath also is just so important to look at it from the different angles of what's going on there, whether it's, having your mouth open at night and mouth breathing, or really just not taking the time to notice what the breath is doing to the body. So we're working on all those facets to it, and then as well as gut restoration. I'm going to say protocols, but they're not protocols. They're just, it's like more guidelines to really help people understand. And then we're going to have a cooking class, which is so fun, right? To be able to do that with people. Cooking really brings a lot of joy into, into circles and to growing together. And I feel like after the pandemic, I feel like that's something that we all missed so much. And one of my things was always to be able to create that, like create a healing space where it wasn't a sterile white doctor's office where you could go, where you could heal, you could feel good, and just kind of come back almost like a new you, right? With new tools that you could implement into your daily life, as well as like resetting that nervous system.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. When is that happening?
October 1st through the 5th, and we're going to Sayulita, Mexico. It was really hard to pin down a spot because there's so many beautiful places, but we found this place, and it just naturally had this feeling of just healing. And Mexico's fairly close to most people in the United States. So we were like, I think this would be a good call for us to meet. And we're just so excited to bring it to people and that want that gut restoration and that nervous system reset.
Yeah. One of my best friends got married there, and it was so beautiful. What a cool area. And that's almost like a healing area anyway. And there's a lot of like healthy food and yoga studios. So it's a really magical place.
Yeah, definitely.
That sounds awesome. Well, Maria, you are a wealth of knowledge. This was an amazing conversation. And tell everybody your socials and where they can find you and your businesses.
Yeah, so I'm on Instagram at Maria_Santee_wellness, or you could look me up at vital-fertility.com. My website, mariasantee.com, should be up and running any day right now, working on some little things. But yeah, and you could always reach out to me, DM me if you have any questions on anything. If you're a PA in our big group, there's about almost 900 of us now, which is so fun. I'm always definitely trying to help people out to understand how they can integrate more alternative ways to healing people. And I really do feel like this is the future of medicine, where we're looking at things that are happening at an integrative approach and through the lens of functional medicine, where we're trying to get to the root cause and not just put Band-Aids out there. So I'm a proponent for whichever way you get there, and you keep learning. Just like you're wanting to know more about homeopathy, and now you've got a little extra in your toolkit to help your family.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. Well, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me. This has been great.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
If you enjoyed this conversation, please take a moment to leave a review. In that review, I would love to hear what topics you'd like to see covered next and which guests you'd love to hear from in future episodes. You can connect with me on Instagram at Original Being Podcast, and be sure to follow, like, and share the podcast on all platforms to help spread the word. Thanks for listening.